So I became a part of this organization because we suffered the loss of a child who was a second child to us through accidental overdose. He died a year and a half ago, and and he was one of those kids that my son grew up with him. He was just part of our family, and he was just always at our house. You know, he was one of those kids that we'd come home after dinner and he was at our house and just sort of like lived there, and he was there forever. And when we found out he died, a piece of me died. So yeah, when I found out that Alex and Justin had started this, you know, when AJ died, and the kids started talking about the number of deaths and overdoses that had happened in the district, and the number just started growing and growing and growing, I felt like I needed to be a part of that conversation, because there's very real things that happen during your adolescence that I think are just not being addressed, you know, and it starts not just with your adolescence, with your sort of how you address your figuring out your independence, and I'm a different person from my friends and my family, but how do we really address mental health as a whole throughout a person's lifespan? And that's really what my role is with the group, is really looking at all of those things. My expertise is in developmental psychology, so it's really looking at how we grow as humans, and how our mental health changes throughout our lifespan. Absolutely. From my perspective as a parent in the district, I think that, you know, in working with children for 30 years, I think there's a real lack of acknowledgement. First of all, that there's an issue, and in really helping kids develop adequate coping skills from a very, very, very young age. I think it needs to start actually in their early childhood program, when you start talking about identifying emotions and identifying, when you're angry, it's okay, and what do you do with that? When you're sad, those are big emotions, those are scary emotions, what do you do with that? But typically what we do as a society is we tend to like push those away, and, you know, okay, you know, don't be angry, and you know, kind of put that to the side, and particularly for little girls, like, we're not allowed to be angry, and we're not allowed to be sad. Boys are not allowed to be sad at all. You know, you never see crying boys, and that's pushed down further as we grow up. And so by the time you get into high school, when you have high school athletes who are kind of held on these pedestals, and they're really struggling with, everybody feels like and we heard it here tonight, you feel like you've got these great lives, and somehow you feel like inside, everybody says I have this great life. I don't feel like I have this great life. What's wrong with me? And now I don't feel like I can tell anybody, because all they're going to say to me is, what's the matter with you? You have this great life. So we need to be able to help kids, first of all, understand that this is okay, and this is natural, and this is normal. What part of it is natural and normal, and what part of it is supposed to happen, and what part of it is not, and how to get help when that happens. So that's really, I don't think the district is doing at all a good job of it. It does not exist in their curriculum at all. So I think there's a few things that need to happen. I think that it needs to be talked about in every single class all the time. I think talking about mental health and emotions needs to be a part of the classes, particularly starting in early childhood. So it's part of the conversation, right? We talk about phys ed or PE, we talk about biology, we talk about all of those things. So we all know that we have arms, we have legs, we know how to move them, we know about nutrition. It's a big part of everything that we're doing in our education. But we don't talk about how do we keep our bodies and our brains healthy and how to keep our emotions healthy. We don't talk about it. That needs to be talked about. It needs to be normalized, period. From there, we need to give the teachers better skills. So right now, the training is something that the teachers can choose to do. It's not mandatory. So the information that the teachers are getting has to compete with a whole lot of other stuff that they need to get to do their jobs. And the teachers may simply not be able to get this information because it has to compete with, I might need to get an ethics class, or I might need to get something on better math training. There's a lot of other stuff that they have to choose from. This has to be mandatory. And they need to get information on how to spot atypical symptoms. And what I mean by that is boys in particular, when we're dealing with anxiety and depression, that typically does not show up on the scales that we see. So when we look at what are the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety, what we tend to see is changes in moods, changes in sleep, changes in eating. We tend to get sad, right? Well, boys in particular tend to get really angry, and that tends to land them in detention. And so when that lands them in detention, that starts this whole cycle of now you're in detention, and that makes them angrier, which lands them in detention again. Every behavior tells a story. We need to figure out what that behavior is telling us and start from there and start asking, why are we doing this? Why are you so angry? And help the teachers to understand that and then get them the help that they need.